pick 13 will be trading hands in from that perspective, but will this pick 13 from Gold Coast has been probably the most prized draft selection up for grabs during this trade period, and a lot of clubs wanted to get their hands on this selection.
I can't remember anything like it. There's 7 clubs officially in the race for pick 7. Obviously, we know now that it's probably more than likely heading towards Collingwood and then via Port Adelaide as well. But all of the Hawks, the Saints, North Melbourne, Sydney threw their hat in the ring, the Bulldogs, and then the West Coast pending a few negotiations with Tom Barrass. They said they were also in the running for it. I haven't seen anything like it. I tell you what, Dal, North's future first-round pick and then some, offered for Gold Coast pick 13. That's a pretty hard deal to turn down.
Yeah, true. Only good players get picked at 13. That's the other piece.
There it is.
I think it was Patrick Cripps. I think Cripps was 13. No, I was referring to Patrick Cripps.
Pick 13.
Yeah. I mean, the North Melbourne one's an interesting piece. Like, you think about the experienced players that they've already brought in this trade period. Caleb Daniel is still getting spoken about, Luke Parker, but it's all about youth for them. So I think the purpose of these older guys that they're bringing in is to nurture, educate these younger guys. Sheasel, Wardlaw, like all these young guys that are actually going to be their future. But these older guys need to do their role and be that piece. So if they can get a couple more of these early picks and not compromise the experience, I think that's great. The one I want to raise is, and maybe we've lost this guy a little bit because of the Dan Houston piece, is Lukosius.
Yep.
Like, he's been a talking point for various reasons, good and bad, about his role and, you know, years ago was trying to get back to South Australia. Were they going to do it? So does he get somewhere near his best and fulfills that elite talent potential that we've seen for years back at Port?
The Power think he's a forward.
Okay.
Asked them that, he's a forward. That's
What
what
is
he's,
Jack?
that role he's
I don't know if you have this. What does he think he is?
I think he thinks he's a forward as well.
Yeah.
Yep. And when he came through his draft year, he dominated, I think, as a forward, particularly for South Australia. It was a dominant South Australian team that had Connor Rosie and Isaac Rankin in it, and he starred inside that forward 50. But I don't think Damien Hardwick knew where his best position was.
No, he admitted that.
Yes.
He couldn't find a spot for it. And the fact that he's going, if Damien Hardwick wanted to keep Jack Lukosius desperately, he'd be staying.
Yeah.
So I think you know that he obviously can't find the right role, and he's happy to let him go in exchange for something in return.
Can we play a little game?
Yes.
If Jack Lukosius fulfills his potential, give me an equivalent player that the level he could get to.
Well, have you got one in mind?
No, I don't. But I was just thinking, we speak about this word potential all the time, and it gets very dangerous. Because at some point, it's not potential, it's just facts about who you are.
Especially in trade period.
Of course. But if Jack Lukosius actually plays somewhere near his best, who is he? And what's the equivalent? Like, what
how many goals does he kick? If he kicks 40 goals?
He can kick 40. It's too weak.
And he's pushed that last year. Yeah.
And do you take that? 40?
I think
40
we
goals?
take 40. If he's not your key forward as well, so let's say he's your second or your third, you know, and it's not Charlie Dixon anymore. Like, who's kicking the goals for them? Who's got to kick the goals? But, you know, maybe it's a chat for another day. But if it actually goes to plan and Port Adelaide go, hey, we tricked you here. You didn't want him and we'll take him and he's at home and he's comfortable again, a little bit like the Isaac Rankin conversation. Like, this does happen. I wonder how good he could actually be.
What's your philosophy on these players? If they haven't put it together by this point, do you think that they're not going to put it together?
I think there's a piece about over a period of time, you just are who you are.
Right.
And potential has a timeline and it has a cut-off point. And maybe Damien Hardwick has experienced this before and he said, I'm not prepared to tolerate or take the risk of potential. I need facts right now.
Yeah.
Is 6 years that timeline? He's been in there for 6 years.
That's part of it, absolutely. So what's he, 24?
Yeah, he's 24.
And there's the rare case, and we'll always go, oh, but what about him? He changed his future and he's, been a fantastic player. They're rare, and I think we have to, find those ones rather than be glaringly obvious.
So there's a lot of potential in the 2024 draft crop. So Kevin Sheehan was at the WA State Combine, of course, the AFL National Talent Ambassador, and he said 2018 was Super Draft number 2. The other year was back in 2001. Decent pick 13
What pick were you there?
There are strong comparisons that this year's crop could be one of the top 3 drafts that we've had in the last 20-odd years. So it's a great time to go to market, so to speak, and get the new talent and stock up, is what all the clubs are saying. If you've got a good draft hand this year, Dal, off that discussion that we just had about potential, how much should you be investing in such a highly touted draft, but ultimately they're all unknown commodities?
Well, I think the draft as a whole, historically, isn't as sound as what we always think. And I did some rough numbers last year or the year before, and I tried to assess, what's a successful career? Was it 100 games, all Australians? How do we measure success? And roughly, and I'm going to say roughly so I don't quote the specific number, of the first round draft picks, you get about 50% of them that go on to have some sort of career. And then we get caught up in this, but Nat Fyfe was in the 20s.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but Sam Mitchell was in the 30s. I'm like, yeah, that's true. Dane Swan was in the... I get it.
Lockie Neal in the 50s.
But they're the rare cases. So your best chance is to get in the top end because unlike American sports where they go through the college system and get drafted at the age of 22, you see more of a body of work. There's a lot of guesswork and we're guessing to the best of our abilities in regards to recruiting. But if you are trying to get to the draft after everything you said, why wouldn't you load up on this one? Why wouldn't you push your chips in and say, absolutely, we'll try and get involved in later on? But the recruiters have been scouting these kids since they were 15, since they were 13. They know that this is the crop.
Well, if the pool's that good and that deep, then you're a better chance when you guess of getting a good one. That's probably why they're so excited by this prospect. The more picks you have, the better.
Does this apply for all 18 clubs? So you've got the clubs that are in the premiership window, take your Brisbane, your Collingwood, do you just put everything aside for right now because of how good a pool it is? Or is there an exception because you're in that premiership window, you still just take a pass?
No, I think everyone's got their own situation. Like you think if Fremantle give up those picks for the couple of the Tigers boys, Fremantle go, thank you very much.
Yeah.
We're in a pretty good position right now in regards to their on-field. They've been okay. I think they underperformed a tiny bit. But then you can get a sound base for the next 10 years as well. So I think every club has a specific purpose. But if you're just on the fringe and you've got a first-round draft pick, it's actually worth more value this year. So you might be able to get something back in return to say, hey, we're pushing our chips in now. We don't want any more draft picks. We need a great player.
Well, Gold Coast doesn't need any more draft picks, hence why again, pick 6 for Damrioli is quite steep, but they don't really need that pick as much as other clubs.
And I'll give you an example. And I know Jake Stringer is going to possibly be the picks in the 50s, so it doesn't quite fit the bill. But if you're the Giants, do you want more draft picks? Or do you say, hey, we were up by 8 goals against...
Both the grand finals.
Both of the grand final teams, and we're sitting at home right now. We haven't slept for 4 weeks because we know that we should have beaten them. Absolutely, we'll give you something for Jake Stringer. Why wouldn't you? We're here to win flags. It doesn't matter if you go to the bottom for another 10 years. And this is maybe coming from a bit of a Saints perspective. Just one, please. It doesn't matter. Just give us one, and then I'm happy to come dead last for another decade.
But he's not the same as Jack Lukosius, is he, Jake Stringer? Because if people tell you who they are, believe them, right? But he's had some pretty high highs, Jake Stringer.
Yeah.
So
I think there's more of a body of evidence with Jake.
Yeah.
There's facts in there. I know he's a premiership player, but he's been All-Australian, All-Australian quality for a long period of time. If you're getting Jake Stringer, you're also knowing what you get. There's going to be the odd week where he may not touch the thing. It might go for a month, but he might kick a goal from 60 in the dying moments to get you over the line. What are you prepared to accept?
You mentioned the Tigers trio that want to try and find clubs in Western Australia. So that's Shea Bolton and Liam Baker. And Dan Rioli obviously wants to get to the Gold Coast Suns. It feels like the Baker Eagles deal will still happen despite that curveball thrown in with Barras, with Carlton and Hawthorn getting pick 14, Carlton getting pick 14 from the Hawks last week. Bolton at his best, is he worth pick 10 and 18? The Tigers are adamant they want pick 10 and 11.
Yeah, I think he is. I love him, and I'll put my hand up. I love the way he goes about his football. He is Dusty when Dusty wasn't there. He's a different version of Dusty. He doesn't have the raw power, but he's got the evasiveness and the agility. So if you think you're buying Dusty, you're not getting the exact same product. It's slightly different. But he's a match winner. He has moments, but I think he's more consistent than some of these other Jake Stringer sort of examples where you compare him to Dusty. I love him, and I think you got to pay. And if it's a little bit overs, then you just got to cop it.
Jeez, he can miss a few though, can't he? He can leave a few on the table.
You
can
leave
a fair few on the table.
You know what though? And maybe this is the glass half full of me. He's having shots.
Yeah, no,
shots on goal.
Yeah.
You know what? If you want to go to the money ball, philosophy, shots on goal. Got to get on base.
Well, I asked you that question about Collingwood if they get Houston. If Freo get Shea Bolton, what does it mean for the next year?
Very much in the picture. I think they've probably underachieved the last couple of years. I think we saw in 2022 when they got to that semi-final, the potential that they have. They've been in that lull for a couple of years. I really think, the acquisition of a guy like Bolton will go a long way.
Maxie Lawton always talks about there's always a team that comes from the bottom 10 into the top 4. And I think the common consensus at the moment is that Fremantle is the most likely team to do that next year.
Should be. Yeah. It should be. You look at their mids. Like you think, okay, what is a premiership team made up of? You got to have a sound midfield. Sarong, Brayshaw, Young, off the top of my head. So you've got the nucleus inside. You've got a big bear in Darcy. You've got the Luke Jackson piece that can work with that sort of unusual dynamic, and we'll wait to see how that plays out.
They need to work together better,
Yeah, I mean, they should be working together, but there's a bit to play out there. And then you add in some X factor up forward. So
Bolton joins Tracy inside that forward 50.
True.
And then miss as well.
Yeah.
And once again, you say, who should be the big jumper? It should be Freo, but Freo should have been somewhere around the mark anyway.
Yep. Just one last one, Dal, on the Bombers. So in the last 5 years, Essendon has gone 11th, 15th, snuck into the 8th, and then finished 13th. I think fair to say Bombers fans are probably a little sick of mediocrity and finishing in the middle of the ladder. Today they traded away pick 9 for a future first rounder, which will help them match a bit on Isaac Kako, who can seriously play.
Yep.
They're going to have a younger list hitting into 2025. So Dyson Heppel retired, Jake Kelly retired, Nick Hine delisted, and Jake Stringer likely to go, and Jaden Laverde and Dylan Shield. It kind of feels like they're not too fussed if they're not on their list next year.
Are they up for trade? Like, where's the Shield?
So Laverde's 28 and I think has attracted interest from other clubs. Shield not as much.
Yeah, okay.
But I think they probably aren't as fussed if Laverde is not there. Do you agree with the Dons? Because when Brad Scott came in at the end of 2022, it was kind of like maybe a premiership or top 4 is maybe in our grasp here or on the cusp of it.
Yep.
But if they're going younger, it looks like at the moment. Do you agree with the Essendon approach to probably maybe take a step back to go forward here?
Yeah, well, it may not be a step back. It may be finish exactly where they did this year, which is deceptively a step forward with a different looking team. Now, Bombers had an easier fixture, which we sort of started to work out at the start of the year when everything seemed like it was going, really well. And you dig a little bit deeper and say it's good form and it's winning form, but is it going to stack up against the big boys? The answer was no. Eventually, the season got a bit long on them and the fatigue sets in. When you have young bodies, that's not uncommon. But you add in this youngster through their NGA. They got Caddy at pick 10 last year. So there can be a bit of both. You can have a foot in each camp. You can get it done now in regards to the draft in age, but it doesn't mean that they're not capable of playing some solid football. So I would love to think that they are capable of playing playing finals, 7th, 8th. Yeah. That's okay. They won't win the final. We'll have that big conversation about where they're at. But they have a good nucleus of youngsters.
Yeah. It's just hard when they've been doing this. It's been so just mediocrity for so long.
I get that, but you can't... If they've got a sound plan now, forget the last 20 years, OK? If you have to start from scratch, it's better than keep on, we're just going to Band-Aid it. We're just going to patch this over.
It's just, I can imagine it'd be hard for them to go, let's forget the last 20...
I get it.
I understand.
I understand, and we all do.
It would be hard for them after all this time.
Then, OK, and I know that I think we know this answer. What's the alternative?
No,
Do it again? Like, I had Dylan Shield as winning a Brownlow. I thought he was that good. I thought the speed, what catches... And take the Brownlow for whatever measurement we want to, but... It catches umpires' eyes, like he's game-breaking, but it just hasn't happened. So I don't hate those decisions. I thought it was the right thing at the time. It hasn't played out that way.
What was your best Brownlow result?
I was about to say, he's a former runner-up of the
runner-up,
Brownlow
were you?
Yeah.
What year was that?
Is it Swanee's year?
Yeah, it was Swanee won by about $1 million, though. It was a runaway.
Second. How about that? Were you in the room?
Yeah.
Oh, I remember Angus Brayshaw wasn't in the room when he came third. Remember that, of course.
It does tend to happen every now and then.
You remember the one in 100?
Oh, yeah, but I remember he came third. I don't remember you coming second, though. How about that?
Mate, you weren't born.
It's just because you were that good for such a long period of time. I'm just going to keep digging.
Dal, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.